Good afternoon, pre-calculus student. Today's lesson is on the next two sets of identity formulas, the double angle identities and the half angle identities. Note that you're only going to be tested on the sine and the cosine identities. I'm going to have listed the tangent identities, and then the reciprocal identities. Well, just remember to find things like secant. You would do cosine and take the reciprocal of it. If it was to find the cosecant, then you would find the sine and then take the reciprocal of that. And if you needed to find cotangent, you would do tangent and find the reciprocal of that. So, which of course means to just flip it. Double angle formulas, which you have on the sheet. First one up is sine of a double angle. That equals 2 times sine of the angle divided by 2 times cosine of the angle divided by 2. Because if you think about this as just one angle, and this 2 alpha, and you divided that by 2, you would get just alpha. Cosine of a double angle has 3 different formulas. It doesn't matter which one of these you use. You will end up with the same result at the end. The only reason you might pick one of these over the other depends on what you've been given in a particular problem. Sometimes it's easier to do cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. Other times it's easier to do one of these, but all 3 of these are just as valid. And of course the tangent of the double angle, again, I won't be testing you on having memorized this formula, but it is a good formula to have and to use, and you definitely need it for the worksheets you're going to be doing today. So for practice, and again this is practice, because we already know that this is going to be 1. We know that sine of 90 degrees is 1 because of the unit circle. But we're just doing this as practice with these new formulas. So instead of thinking of it as sine of 90 degrees, I'm going to think of that as sine of 2 times 45. Therefore, using the double angle formula, I would say that sine of 2 times 45 is equal to 2 times the sine of 45 times the cosine of 45. We know the values of sine of 45. Those are nice and easy ones to remember. And multiplying that all together, we end up with 1, which is what we said we were going to get in the beginning. Here's another one, cosine of 120. Again, 120 is in our unit circle. And so we know that the answer to this, or we should know, that the answer to this is negative 1/2. But this is practice, so let's look at what else we could say. Well, we could say that 120 degrees is 2 times 60. And so I'm going to use the first formula where I did cosine squared of alpha minus sine squared alpha. What I like about this one is this ends up giving me the ordered pair at 60 degrees. Cosine is the x and sine is the y. So when you're using this formula, you're simply writing the ordered pair. But don't forget you're squaring each one of those. And simplifying that, we get negative 1/2, which is exactly what we said we were going to get. We could have instead just used this formula, 1 minus 2 sine squared 60 degrees. And if we work that out, we can see we get negative 1/2 again. Or, if you had preferred, you could have used 2 cosine squared 60 minus 1. And again, simplifying it out, we still get negative 1/2. So it didn't matter which one of these 3 formulas I used, I got the correct answer. For tangent, here I'm using 4 pi over 3. And if I looked at that as a double angle, well, 4 pi over 3 is the same thing as 2 times 2 pi over 3. So I use the formula, plug everything in, simplify, and I get the square root of 3, which, had we looked at our unit circle and the coordinate pairs and did sine over cosine, or the y over the x, we would have noticed that it was positive root 3. The next set of formulas are the half angle formulas, and again you have those in your on your handout. Now it's really important here, they're going to bring up this issue of this plus or minus out in front. And we have that for both the sine and the cosine. Not only do they have this plus or minus out in front, but they look almost identical. The sine of the half angle, so an angle that is half of something else. So if A was 100, then this angle would actually be 50. So if the angle was 50, I could say that A is 100. Not only do we have this plus or minus on both of these, but with sine it's 1 minus cosine of A, and for cosine it's 1 plus cosine of A in the numerator. Now what is this plus or minus? It does not mean that there are two answers. Not at all. It means you're going to have to figure out, is it going to be a positive square root, or is it going to be a negative square root? And what it depends on is what quadrant is this angle, not the A, but the A divided by 2. What quadrant is that angle in? Tangent does not have plus or minus out in front of it, but you'll look at that and just write that down and you'll need to use that. So if I had sine of 45 degrees, I need to think about how I could write that as something divided by 2. Well, 45 happens to be 90 divided by 2. So 90 becomes my alpha. I have to determine first, is this going to be a positive or negative answer? Well, we go up here and say sine of 45. What quadrant is 45 degrees in? 45 degrees is in quadrant 1. And since it's in quadrant 1, we know that sine is positive. So we only want the positive square root. We do not want the negative square root. So we want the positive square root of 1 minus cosine of 90 divided by 2. Cosine of 90 is 0, so we get 1 over 2. Well, it's the square root of, which we can rationalize our denominator, and then we have our root 2 over 2. Cosine of 5 pi over 6. Well, that's the same thing as 5 pi over 3 divided by 2. And you have to think about your fraction work for this. Again, we have to think about, is it going to be positive or negative? Well, 5 pi over 6 is in quadrant 2, and cosine is negative in quadrant 2. So this problem is going to be a negative square root. So see, we have a negative out in front, and then we have 1 plus cosine of the alpha, 5 pi over 3, all divided by 2. Knowing from our unit circle what cosine of 5 pi over 3 is. Again, you could say, well, I knew from the unit circle what cosine of this is. We're not doing this because we don't know these right now. We're learning how to use these formulas, and later on, you're going to be given different information to figure it out. Simplifying, we get negative root 3 over 2. And I'm going to leave you on your own to figure out the tangent one. Work these together. You can call me and ask me some questions. My cell phone coverage may be a little bit spotty today, so hopefully we'll get through. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.